transcription. By the way, we're not supposed to have transcriptions.
I mean, really?
As the AI is.
Oh, yeah.
Is unreliable. So we do nothing at all. Not supposed to transcribe, or at least not use the automatic transcription.
Yeah. We'll have somebody.
But we do have offices.
We used to have a time and temperature in our elevator.
It
was always wrong.
2, 3.
Yeah.
So one day.
How do you guys?
Good.
Good.
Piece of metal sticker right on
All
top.
right, we can.
Just
If we got everybody.
Okay. Yes, call to order.
All right.
Know about the,
Right.
Hear
I
ye.
need a gavel. Hear ye, hear ye.
We'll start.
All right, we're gonna get rolling here. All right, so welcome to the February 13th Site Plan Review Committee Subgroup Meeting, 3033 Wilson Project. We will be holding a hybrid public meeting which enables remote electronic participation, legally authorized by the Code of Virginia for the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted on July 7th, 2022. Members of the SPRC subgroup for the 3033 Wilson Project are participating here in person and virtually by means. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our hybrid environment, cover a few specifics about how tonight's run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the SPRC webpage, project webpage, county's events calendar, and the email notification sent to SPRC email subscribers. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use. For our subgroup members joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during tonight's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you are called upon. Turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. For our virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I will address you, and Peter will also address you when it is an appropriate time to turn that on. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes. One, for SPRC subgroup members who need technical assistance, and two, for members of the public to add their names to the list for public comment, which will be taken at the end of the meeting. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion. Those who are planning to provide public comment will need to do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat will not serve as the opportunity. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment period. If subgroup members participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, please turn your video feed on and raise the virtual hand in Teams. I will monitor the video feeds that are, Peter will also be monitoring the feeds that are as an indicator as to who would like to speak. If subgroup members are participating via phone today, without the video option, please announce your name and group you are representing now, and I will verbally check in. Recognize as you do not have the video feed option. Okay, hearing none. For members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment, you will be called on to speak at the end of the meeting and will be allotted 2 to 3 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda item. The speaking time allotted will depend on the number of speakers we have this evening. If you wish to speak, please enter your name in the meeting chat for virtual attendees or provide staff with your name if in person, and you will be added to the speakers list. Lastly, this is a public forum. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. Okay.
Want to take roll?
Yes. My name is Tony Striner. I'm chairing this meeting from the Planning Commission.
Steve Sockwell from Forestry and Natural Resources Commission. Jim Lantelli, Planning Commission.
Chad Berwick, Clarendon Courthouse Civic Association. Andrew Czekowski, SKNI Architecture.
Matt Weinstein, McGuire Woods. Carlos Mendeo, Authority. Jason Bachnick with the applicant. Tom Rogers, Star Properties.
Robert Gibson, Arlington DES Transportation.
Peter Schultz, Arlington Planning Division.
Anybody?
Juno Pennell, I live in Clarendon Courthouse.
We have at least one person, well, one more person who's watching, and then we have people online.
Anybody online?
I was at the last meeting of Bonnie thing.
Oh, thank you. We do have Eric Goodman from the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, who is virtual today. Are there any other virtual members of the SPRC tonight? not,
I think Erica is here from the Parks and Natural Resources.
do we have someone from the Parks and Natural Resources
Yeah,
online?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you. What's your name for the record? I'm sorry, you're not on my list.
hi, Erica Allen.
Okay, great. All right. Virtual. Okay.
All right, so with that underway, we'll move into the staff presentation.
This is just we present the topics today, including at the beginning, again, remind everybody where we are. We're discussing the 3033 Wilson Boulevard new site plan proposal. A refresher of the site plan proposal with the revised parking fees. Yep, it's submitted. Again, our policy guidance is going to be the Clarendon sector plan along with the master transportation plan. The biggest change since the last meeting, and you'll see more of this in the applicant's proposal is, and we will hope to discuss first, is the applicant has two options for a taper. This is an example of a two-step taper. The applicant will describe in much more detail. There is no specific guidance for this site for tapering, so we have been using sort of an what a good urban design practice, as well as taking ideas from other areas of the county that have tapering guidance to hopefully help guide the design of this building to be an appropriate transition to the R5 community next door. And the applicant will explain their thinking, their current thinking, and show you two options later in the meeting. For parking and loading, right now the applicant proposes 4 retail parking spaces, which is that's appropriate. The first 5,000 square feet of retail use is not required to have parking this close to Metro, according to the zoning ordinance. So 4 retail spaces is the code requirement, meets the code requirement for retail parking at this location. The applicant is proposing an official parking count of 0.9 spaces per unit. This close to the Metro, again, that actually exceeds county guidelines. The zoning ordinance requires 1 space per unit, but county guidelines say this close to Metro, we can go even lower than that, but 0.9 per unit is what the applicant is proposing. 6% compact ratio. There are going to be extra spaces that are largely compact, and the applicant might explain a little bit about that further. It's basically driven by keeping the existing parking garage, which has a large number of spaces that we consider compact today, that are slightly smaller than our parking standards, but has stayed intact since the 1980s. The applicant is proposing 2 loading spaces, that is 1 fewer than the zoning ordinance requires. So that is a modification requested from the zoning ordinance. It does, for size and depth of the loading docks, does meet the standard site plan requirement. At least 1 loading space has to be 40 feet deep. The other loading spaces have to be at least 14 feet or 15 feet high clearance if used for garbage. All right, and my colleague, Robert Gibson, from the Department of Environmental Services Development Services Bureau, will walk us through the applicant's proposed street cross sections, which have changed since the initial submittal and have been revised to more closely comply with our plans.
The applicant is proposing to provide 2 westbound travel lanes on Wilson Boulevard, a parking lane on the south side of the street, a parking lane on the north side of the street, and then a 2.5-foot buffered space and a 5.5-foot protected bike lane within the curb-to-curb street. And then working our way towards the face of the building, there is a 6-foot planting strip, an 8-foot wide clear sidewalk, and then for about 60% of the building, there is a 6-foot wide cafe zone provided. And then for the other 40%, there is a building shy zone that varies as at the entrance to the building. Next. Along North Highland Street, the applicant is proposing to provide 2 travel lanes, a combination of 2 and 3 travel lanes. North Highland Street, as you move north, bifurcates. And so when that's at that split north of there, a travel lane in each direction is proposed. But at Wilson Boulevard, two travel lanes southbound are provided. One would be a turn lane. Within the streetscape, at least a 6-foot wide planting area is provided, at least an 8-foot wide clear sidewalk. And then there is extra shy and building zone provided along the building. Next. And then finally, along North Garfield, there is a travel lane in each direction, parking on both sides of the street. On North Garfield Street, the applicant's curb line will help to deal with some transitions along the street as it goes into the neighborhood. Currently, there's a bit of a jog in the roadway. This plan will help to alleviate that. And then along in the streetscape, a 6-foot wide planting zone, an 8-foot wide sidewalk, and a 3.5-foot wide building shy zone is proposed.
And then to move on to landscaping on the site is actually mostly by the plaza, which is actually off-site in county right-of-way, which a former street that was closed up to create that corner plaza that we know today. The sector plan recommends public seating in this area, perhaps a kiosk, recommends a goal of 40% tree canopy in said plazas. We've been working with the applicant to find the right balance of accommodating the expected pedestrian flow, public seating, and landscaping in that proposed plaza, which you see a little bit here. The applicant will show you more in their presentation of how we've been able to balance those uses. The purple being the clear sidewalk space, and you can see seating, public seating inside the plaza here, which will be open to the public. For green building and sustainability, the applicant is requesting a 0.35 FAR bonus for meeting LEED Gold and county priority credits. Those are those extra list items. So it's not just LEED Gold, also the county's particular energy efficiency standards and long-term energy performance standards. The applicant also agrees to maintain the green wall plantings that they've shown us in landscaping plans during this review process. Generally at the end of the SPRC, we have just a short discussion because it's really not firmly set about construction timeline and hauling routes. So I just wanted to share with the committee and the public standard conditions that we impose on such site plan constructions, which are generally up and above and on what by right development would be. For instance, we limit the hours that work can be done in the right of way. We know Wilson Boulevard's a major arterial. Construction work can only occur between 9 and 3:30 Monday through Friday, between 10 and 6 Wednesdays and holidays. Construction hours are limited on the property to 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday, 9 to 9 on holidays. However, I should note when the building is fully enclosed, the only restriction is on the noise ordinance. Hauling is always required to be in defined routes that subcontractors must be aware. This is monitored by our Department of Environmental Services and Zoning after approval. The developer has to develop a hauling plan. I presume the hauling plan in this particular case will be stick to arterial routes and obviously not burden neighboring properties in residential areas to the extent possible. Civic associations and abutting property owners have to be notified in writing 7 days in advance of any street closure longer than an hour. Abutting property owners need to be advised in writing of utility work that may affect their services. Construction workers have to have off-street parking available free to them so that they do not burden neighborhood streets. There's always got to be a community liaison during construction with contact information, and even before demolition begins, there's a standard condition that a community meeting be held with the local civic association in order to share all of the above information, the hauling routes and the timeline. So this is the public process schedule. We're at the second live SPRC meetings, although the third public engagement, starting with the online engagement. This isn't the end of it. Tentatively, there will be commission meetings with at least the Transportation Commission, perhaps the Housing Commission, because of an affordable housing package is hopefully to be proposed here. And those would be held in the May cycle, and then county board public hearing for all of the subject applications at the May county board hearing. So this ends the staff presentation. Give it to the applicant.
Just a word for everyone here. Apparently, microphones aren't as sensitive as are the conference room, so speak up if you can.
Jump right in. I guess. No. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Andy Czakowski with SK&I Architecture. So we've been working with staff closely over the last several weeks. A couple things. I guess we'll start with the architectural update. I'm going to go to the next slide. The primary concern that we've been kind of working with staff is the tapering on the North Garfield sort of end as it faces the residential neighborhood to the north. So this image is the original submission back in July, where we had sort of a 2-story base, a 4-story body, and then the 2-story upper deck that sort of tapered back. Generally, we're following the original zoning guidelines in the zoning ordinance. I do want to point out one little thing. If you look at the top of the sort of the dark box, there's a little gray box that's kind of poking out. That's an exit stair that we had originally going to the roof. So we're actually, if you go to the next slide, that's sort of a building set that we really can't move. So we've been studying this for several weeks, and we came up with this solution as option 1 of 2. So that stair is sort of fixed and now only goes to the top floor. It does not go to the roof, so it doesn't expose itself. But what we did here is essentially, in order to leave the 2-story base, sort of this 4-story body of masonry on the back, we eliminated the top 2 units on the 7th and the 8th floor. So we've lost 4 units to this project, but that allows us to give us a pretty sizable roof garden that we'll share in another minute. Option 2 is essentially the double step that Peter alluded to at the beginning of the meeting. In this one, we still lose those 4 units on levels 7 and 8, and then this takes floors 5 and 6 and pulls them back about 3.5 feet. And then that sort of sets up this double step option. So there's essentially a 4-story or 2-story base, 2-story masonry body, and then a double step of metal panel facing the neighborhood. This still allows a generous, I'll talk in a minute, a community garden on the roof. So if you go, now we have a couple of slides illustrating if you're standing on Garfield looking back south towards Wilson Boulevard. This was the original submission. Go to the next slide. This is the option 1, which shows that 4-story masonry body kind of turning and then losing those top 2 floors of units on the 7th and 8th floor. And then the next option is that double step. So this pulls the 5th and the 6th floor, back several feet as well. So this is sort of this cascading paper towards the neighborhood. On the next slide, so I guess we're looking for feedback as to which option the county prefers. Both of these options allow for what we're hoping to do here is a community garden on the 7th floor of the building. It'd be the roof of the 6th. And so Carr introduced a group, EC group that sort of maintains and cultivates community gardens. So this is actually used a couple blocks away at the 10 on Clarendon. It's a group called Love and Carrots, and this is from their website, a handful of their gardens. These are raised beds that they can put on top of roofs. It works very well, and they can come and curate and manicure and manage this garden, while residents still have the option to participate. This is the view, sort of an aerial view, sort of hovering over Garfield looking back. This is option one, where we keep the 4 stories with masonry. Looking back, you can see it's a pretty sizable garden. On the roof, we do have a green roof adjacent to it. We do need to limit the sort of the occupancy. We're trying to keep this about 720 square feet up there, so we can keep the occupant load, because we only have one means of egress. But so it functions from a building code standpoint. And then we can provide this community garden. The next slide shows the double taper. So you see the sort of a cascading effect. It doesn't impact the size of the garden, but it gives you that double effect if that's the sort of the preferred route. Next slide. Yeah, here's sort of a close-up, sort of the size and scale of the space, the size of the planters. These are all raised beds. We can do this on top of this. Essentially, have wood trusses beneath this, so we can put this kind of like load on this roof, and have a small sedum bed to wrap around it, so it's still a pleasant experience up there. The next slide is the pool house. Yeah, so one of the things that we wanted to emphasize in terms of like sustainability, biophilia, is that we do have this centerpiece of this open U courtyard. We have it built up 4 or 5 stories, and we are putting a pool terrace on there. And we have the ability, because it is concrete on this portion of the building, to put a larger raised planted bed. This is to help protect the pool from the neighborhood and the neighborhood from the pool. So having the ability to put larger, more robust plants and trees up here is we think is something that we didn't really illustrate before. Next slide. Oh, this is so in discussions about the Wilson Boulevard and North Highland and Garfield for that matter, the idea was to emphasize sort of the 3rd, the 4th, or the 5th floor, and sort of in lieu of a major setback on those portions of the building. The setback caused significant yield damage and compromised a lot of prime units on Wilson Boulevard because of the adaptive reuse nature of this project, and we're maintaining. We went into that in the last presentation. So this was the enhancement to the facade, and I think one of the things that maybe didn't go over that, or wasn't clear in the previous presentation or in the submission for that matter, was the amount of like brick detailing that we wanted to put into this project. Arlington has a rich history of sort of Art Deco, Deco inspired, a lot of masonry buildings. So we wanted to add to that cultural heritage and add a significant sort of decorative piece of architecture to the portfolio, to the canvas of the county. So what we did is, this is actually at the 4th floor. That cafe sign and sort of the biophilic canopy over the retail is technically the 2nd floor. So this is now at the 4th floor. We're adding a double row of soldier course with a herringbone pattern with brick relief at that, and we'll wrap the entirety of the main facade from Highland around Wilson and back up. This is a view of that cornice line, and here's a view as you go back towards Garfield, looking over Wilson. You can see that horizontality. It adds a lot of it adds horizontality to the building, as well as shadow, relief, texture, etc. There's sort of a close up of that detail, and then you can also start seeing the sort of the brick coursing detail of the windows. And there's a couple other slides that we wanted to introduce. We were trying to kind of play a game with very subtle brick detailing, but sort of a hierarchy of details. So this is the corner piece looking at the metro that has sort of the copper crown. This has sort of a double layer around the windows. There's pairs of soldier courses, stacked soldier courses immediately adjacent to the window with a zipper pattern on the right side. So it's sort of a double layer of details on the primary corner, and then you go to the next slide, which is sort of the standard detail, you eliminate those soldier courses and you just get the zipper detail on the right side of the window. So hopefully it adds a lot of texture and shadow play to the property.
Canopy.
Yeah, so this was actually one of Leo's comments was is there a way to enhance the entrance? And we did want to maintain sort of the plinth of the building, the third floor line that sort of, runs along the entire perimeter. So we were trying to keep everything at the first and second floor. And this is that canopy that wraps the retail. It is the sort of a biophilic moment. It's a planted canopy, and as it transitions around the column and the little shy zone area that we discussed last time, it rises back up, runs over the top of the lobby space, and then we splayed it over the front door to create sort of a zone for signage, building signature. And then it runs back down and wraps back up at another biophilic moment of green wall, where we can put the address of the building, the property, and play that off of the green wall.
I think it's straight. You want to pause there and give feedback on the taper and updates? Or do you want to go over the whole presentation?
Yeah, I guess for those of you who were here at the first meeting, that was a big piece of our discussion. So this first chunk of changes, the developer was very responsive in addressing. And so I guess based on the discussion that we had last time, based on the concern that some of us have voiced, I guess generally we all feel that they address the spirit of the concerns. Anyone has a comment on that? Well, first off, you walked in. What's your name? Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, Bill Gerhart, I'm representing Lion Village.
Okay.
What is the height on the neighborhood side there?
The home side of the building.
I think what the neighbors would prefer is the lowest, so you've got a maximum taper. And under the sector plan, when you get to the R zone neighborhood, you should be down to 55 feet. So what is the height?
Are you talking from?
Well, on the neighborhood side of the building.
At the fifth, what the applicant gave us, what's the height at the fifth floor there? What's the height at the seventh floor?
All the floors are generally, the two on the bottom are 9'8", so it's like you're right around 20 feet, and then it's another, 40 feet on top of that. So that's about 60 feet at the top of the seventh floor.
But the step back begins at 40 feet. On
Yes.
this option.
Yeah, this option right here, so that begins at 40 feet, and then it tapers back, and then it goes up to 60 feet, and then it goes back another, I can't remember the dimension, but it's like 60 feet off of that. And
It's roughly 40 feet, and because under the sector plan, it's supposed to be 55 feet at the neighborhood edge.
No, there's no taper guidance for that.
But the general sector plan has a guidance, and you're exceeding the 75 feet for the building that the sector plan calls for. So can we compromise a little bit there?
Well, that's why we're starting at 40 feet, right?
Yeah. So we're starting at 40 feet. The tapering starts at 40 feet. And this option, we showed you two. So
Okay.
This
and
option-
that's 40 feet.
Yeah, right here. Yeah, this is higher than we would like, yeah. This, starting at the fifth floor is about 40 feet.
yeah, that's 40 feet.
And then going back in the building where it's the dark brick,
Yeah, that's like a dark metal panel.
well, the back part there, what's the height there?
Yeah, so it goes.
Because that's going to be on the neighborhood side as well.
It goes 40, 60.
Can we bring that height down on the neighborhood side? I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about the part in front of it.
Right here, this is.
On the right.
Right here is the existing, let's see, this is about where the existing C3 zoning line is.
Okay, that's where the existing.
And then they're
building is.
moving the asking for a rezoning to move the C3 zoning lines here. So they could have over here a building that's 75 feet tall right at this location. They are asking for a modification for it to be 85 feet. Yes. But at this location, it could be up to 75 feet tall by right.
And by right, that's under,
Under the current C3 zone.
but they're not building a C3 apartment building.
Yeah, so
What's the density under C3 by right?
3.0 FA. But they would only be able to build an office building, but in theory, you could have, an office building that's 75 feet tall right here.
But when you say it's 3.0 FAR for residential in by right C3, you're doing by right or you're doing site plan?
No, it has to be an office.
Pardon?
It would have
By
to be
right,
an
by
office.
right can only be an office. It can be 3.0 FAR.
Okay.
That's why we're at a site plan here, because they're asking for a residential.
An office isn't gonna help any of us.
Right. Jim, I saw your hands up too.
Yeah, this is clearly an approval from last time, and option 2 is the one that is most preferable because it has the additional step back. So I also like the fact that visually it looks like even more of a step back because having the black or the dark gray against the white goes step, step, step. I mean, it makes it closer to what it's like the Zoso flats on Danville a few blocks away, where the classic step 1, 2, 3 going all the way up. This isn't quite Zoso, which backs up against Lion Park. I think it's Lion Park or Urinate or Clarendon Court. It's one or the other right down there. But this gets way closer to that. What I would like to know, and staff, Peter, you can probably explain this. On the Highland, this is the Garfield side, where we have residential, R5 residential houses right there. It's R5 on Island 2, but the two houses there are commercial uses. One is a dentist, the other is now a religious use, but it used to be a podiatrist. Could you explain how that works and what, because it's in a residential zone, but not a residential use. So Peter could explain to everybody how that works and whether that would be carrying forward.
Well, in the R5 zoning district, of course, that's single-family detached houses are allowed by right. Duplexes are allowed by use permit under certain conditions. And then medical offices are allowed in our districts with use permits or site plans, depending on the size of the property and their condition. And in fact, if the applicant could move to the aerial bird's eye view so that they could show the paper that they put on the Highland Street side as well. There we go. R5 allows medical offices with a use permit. Way back in the 60s or 70s, doctor got a use permit for a medical office on that site, and use permits are good forever. They run with the land, and they're whoever buys the property, succeeds to the use permit. The use permit does not die just because it changes hands. So the medical office has been there for 50 plus years. Next door is a religious facility that's allowed by right in any zoning district in Arlington and probably in Virginia, as long as they meet certain, parking standards. However, of course, in an R5 district, if somebody were to buy these properties, tear them down and turn them into single family houses, they certainly could. But those on Highland Street, you can't quite see here, but the applicant might want to explain that they did provide a little bit of a taper. The zoning line is not moving here. The rezoning that they're asking for is on the Garfield Street side. They're asking to shift to basically the C3 zoning line 20 feet to the north. That's why we were most particularly as staff insistent on a taper on this side, whereas they're sticking to basically where the existing building could end right now, where the existing C3 zoning line is. However, they might want to explain, they did provide a bit of a 2.5 foot taper, is it there? Yeah, step back, yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation. The other thing, the use on the roof, I think is appropriate here because we've always been concerned in the neighborhoods about having sort of party spaces overseeing the neighborhoods. From what you've explained, that could never be a party space. One, because the number of people on it, it's also fairly small because the seating around it presumably is not going to be allowed people are not allowed to walk on that?
Correct.
Correct. Okay, so it's really a smaller public space, or residential use space. And it's a very passive space. So you wouldn't be using parties, having allowed for parties up there. Whereas in the U, having now what type of planters, are they gonna be like evergreen year round? Or are they, what are you proposing to have in that space between the pool and the neighborhood? Is it, you're gonna be putting, it's concrete, you're gonna be putting more significant plantings there, those. What are you contemplating there? Do you have an idea yet, or is that your landscape architect's gonna choose that?
Yeah, they would choose.
Okay, because I would strongly urge something that would be, this summer, of course, it's gonna be green, so that helps both visually and orally shield that area. That's gonna be your party space. But if anything, in the shoulder seasons, people are still gonna wanna be out there for things, presumably. That anything that would shield the noise, that's natural would be very useful and very, very much appreciated by that neighborhood.
Would people be allowed in this area during the shoulder seasons? For, I think, insurance reasons, my building won't let us in the pool deck area when there's not a lifeguard there. So would that,
Yeah, that's a good point you raised. There are some strategies to bifurcate the pool deck so that the pool is behind a fence that's locked effectively during the winter. And in that scenario, you could let people out onto the pool deck. We haven't got that far along in the design, but that's a strategy we've seen in other projects. We prefer to have that flexibility if at all possible.
Very good, it's outdoor spaces,
Yeah.
Yeah, Erica, we're calling on you. You're on.
All right, hi guys. I'm here on behalf of the Parks and Rec Commission. And yeah, I just want to point out like the ideas for like the rooftop garden, adding, more green space in that plaza area. I think all of those are like really great additions. I actually like work around that area, and just this general area in general doesn't have like a lot of good shade and green space. So I think this is a really important addition to this area. And I just had a couple questions. So in the pictures for the plaza, it looks like you guys are going to incorporate like some tree plantings. And then like your green walls and all of the plant features that you have. Do you guys have a maintenance plan in place to like just make sure that the plants are like upkept, and that they're surviving and that there's longevity throughout?
Yeah, I'll jump in,
Yeah.
but I mean, we're getting to that a little later in the presentation, but there is a maintenance plan, and that's gonna be one of the slides. So definitely you're ahead of us, and we get what you're saying. We'll jump to that in a second.
Okay, awesome. And then my only other thing would be, at least as of right now, is when you do release your site plan for the county board, just making sure that you actually have the list of all the plants that you want to include, like not just trees, but like the shrubs and everything. And we just really urge you to use native plants because, it's important to, not just have it look nice, but it also be like beneficial for the natural environment.
Okay. Okay, so we have a couple more hands here, but then I'm gonna try and get this thing so you all can finish the presentation at 7:45. And so please go ahead, Eric.
Eric, can you hear us?
I think I just unmuted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to ask you before I even go any further, is this a good time that I can talk about pedestrian related items, or should I wait till later and after the presentation?
I'd hold that when we get to the transportation topic.
Okay, I'll wait for that then. Thank you.
I won't forget you.
All right.
Just a couple of comments. One is I like the option 2 taper, simply because it's more dramatic. And the other is, since you brought up a roof garden, are you, it seems to me you have an opportunity to put in some pollinator plants. You sort of talk about that in the plaza. So I know your landscape architect is thinking that way. But here, if you limit the people to the interior part, which is what you're talking about doing, it looks like you can certainly put some pollinator outside the people area. And, why not? It makes it more green, and it also effectively serves as a screen.
I think option 2 looks good too. So I'm on board with that. I don't know if we can talk about this later, but I still am a little bit confused with what's going on inside of the U. I get the pool deck, but I was wondering, is there more courtyard there that we weren't seeing? But we can talk about that later.
Yeah, I also like option 2. I'm thrilled that you were so responsive to our feedback from the last meeting. I like that, as Commissioner Lantoni mentioned, the change in the color, I think also sets to make it feel like it's even farther away. I really like the rooftop garden. I think that's wonderful. And I think, is there another choice that we had to make? Looking at the front of the building, and yeah, I mean, I like the masonry. I think it looks really nice. Thank you for providing that detail. I feel like the entrance is still a little subtle to me, but I do see the improvement from last time. So thank you.
All right, and then I'm gonna throw in a couple of my 2 cents. I love the roof garden. And I preferred option 1, but I have an option 2 is the left bit here is this kind of gray color, and it's not matched on the other side of the U. That's just something I thought in terms of symmetry of the building. And then with the stone masonry on the floor, how you have those almost very cool patterns that move horizontally. Again, this is kind of on the symmetry piece. It would, I guess, I would think it would look cooler if the patterns were extended on the top rung as well. It would kind of make it more consistent in terms of the appearance. But then just so we make sure everybody's kind of getting heard on the option 1 or 2, we're going to do a very quick show of hands vote. And then virtually, if you could just raise your virtual hand when I say out the option you want, we're going to try and make this work. So if you prefer option 1, just raise your hand.
Put option 1 up so people know what it is.
Option
Yeah, can you
1,
show those?
yeah, we can switch to that.
That was just the one
So option 1,
taper.
Tony, I didn't hear your reasoning for why you liked option 1 versus 2.
it looks, yeah, it's visually, it looks more consistent to me. That's just my style, but apparently I'm in the minority.
Just to make sure we're looking at the right thing, this is the north side of the building, right?
Yes, side with the neighborhood.
You have a picture of the Highland Street side of the building and the Baptist Church affordable housing building across Highland from it?
In this presentation, we don't have, like, we weren't
Right, well,
looking. We have it, but we.
okay, but still, it would be nice to see what the view is from the neighborhood, from the Highland Street side too. Yeah, because that would be probably the more in your face type.
There is a view, that view does exist. It's in the.
Okay, so at that point, it seems option 2 is the winner, given I was the only one to raise my hand for option 1. So we can go ahead and get rolling. If you all can get back, I think sustainability is where we're picking up.
Or transportation.
Close to one.
One of them.
We haven't done sustainability.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so we'll get rolling the rest of it.
All right, so we're super excited about the sustainability strategy here at the project. The project is, or will certainly qualify as LEED Gold, and we do plan to also qualify through the incentive policy program, those so-called priority points, to secure the 0.35 FAR bonus. To be honest with you, there's 5 or maybe even 6 strategies that we're seriously considering in terms of which 3 of the strategies we plan to eventually qualify for. Please remember, this is the project where we're saving the garage, which really tells a compelling story about life cycle assessment. And we've created a short slide following this to talk about that for a minute. The social equity program in Arlington I think is a really positive movement. And the feedback from our team at Car Properties is that we would most certainly like to participate in that, regardless of even qualifying for this priority point, to be honest with you. And then there's some other energy efficient items here that we really like as well. I've talked a little bit about LEED, life cycle assessment, bird-friendly glass, of course. We know that that's important in Arlington. That's a great initiative. Biophilia, I think Andy's done a good job talking about that on other features around the project. Heat island effect, reduction in particular. There's a good story here at this project. Please remember, we're demolishing a 90s vintage office building with a surface lot. It's a lot of concrete. It's a lot of heat island, which we can remove with this new program, which we're excited about. And we are pushing to the brink of electrifying the building. We will have just a bit of on-site combustible energy just for the coldest days of the winter. But we are able to electrify the project 98% otherwise. This next slide we're excited about. The bottom line here is that we're reducing our carbon footprint by 60%. And we love talking about this slide, but I totally understand we're short on time. I think we've mentioned before how impactful preserving that garage is, which you can see is about 30% of that 60% reduction. And of course, these are metrics that are measured in metric tons carbon dioxide equivalents. And we will be taking a close look at the roof to reduce the heat island impact on the project through the normal mitigation factors. Let's move on to biophilia here. Andy, this is a good slide for you to pick back up, please.
Sure. Yeah. So obviously we'll have the street trees and plaza, which Park Rodriguez will talk about in a moment. But there's opportunities between the canopy that runs along the retail. We just introduced the biophilic garden on the roof with the sedum perimeter, and then we have the pool deck and the green buffer against the neighborhood. The last place where we do have it, we haven't really illustrated it yet, is the courtyard, the lower courtyard. So that's when you actually walk into the lobby, you go through the lobby, you'll be able to see the courtyard. That'll be planted with water basins and trees, et cetera. So there's lots of moments to add to the canopy and add to the body of the neighborhood. So this is a product that's actually starting to pop up other places in the county. Right across the street, the Windy has the similar thing. This is a company, and this kind of gets into the maintenance as well. But there's a product. It's essentially a mineral wool panel that you just basically adhere right onto like burring channels on your exterior skin. So this becomes the exterior skin. There's a little highlight of it in the top middle. It's basically a panel that has mineral wool fiber, if you know what that is, but it basically it's an insulation, but it also holds water. And they basically have all those little dots that you see on the right. Each one is like a little pocket in the mineral wool. And what they've figured out they can do is they can plant a little sedum plant into that mineral wool. Then they run a grid of water lines through the panels, and they all interconnect. And then there's a sensor that will release the water if in the dry season, if it gets dry, hot, whatever. It monitors the humidity, moisture level, releases the water, keeps the plants wet at all times. What's nice, and then part of the maintenance agreement, I guess, is that this company not only installs, but they'll come back on like a quarterly or a semi-annual thing, and they'll see what's working, what's not working, and they can pull out plants that are failing and put in new ones. So it's constantly a vibrant wall. They do this for both the wall and for the canopies.
Peter, if you don't mind.
Good evening. This is Trina Rodriguez from Parker Rodriguez, a landscape architects. With me is Steve Sattler on care as well. Just wanted to sort of summarize some of the things or reiterate some of the things that have been discussed in this evening's presentations. You know, what's interesting is we've been working pretty hard with staff, with transportation, with the civil engineering team to make sure that, you know, the streetscape is tightened up. We've been able to actually relocate the curbs. As Peter mentioned before, even on Highland, we've been able to actually smoothen the edge of the street to actually make it a much more smooth transition into the neighborhood. And with that, it allowed us to introduce a lot more green around the building edge as well as the perimeter. So you can see that resulted in a very consistent streetscape. We have a very rhythmic pattern of street trees. It's only interrupted to the access to the garage and the loading, as you can see there. And that happened along the three edges of the site. On Wilson, we've been working with a transportation consultant as well. So you can see how that has resulted in a much greener streetscape. That whole idea of sort of biophilia that has been talked about so much, not only at the, you know, building level, and Andy just finished talking about all these elements and all these components. We've actually worked with that company doing a number of installations through town. So we have the experience and on how that can be a successful sort of a winning treatment for, you know, bringing plants and bringing green sort of close to people. So that's the same, you know, just walking around the North Garfield Street, the same, you know, with the new streetscape standards. So the result of all this sort of pulling and pushing that has taken place reshaped, and the geometries for the plaza have changed a little bit, but working again with all the transportation team and staff, we came up with a design that I think allows for a very fluid movement, emphasizing the streetscape and very continuous move through from the neighborhood all the way to the corner, which becomes sort of that plaza and community node, and moving through as you move across the urban fabric. So the streetscape is continuous. We did talk about, you know, that fluidity. But I wanted to highlight a couple of things that have been talked about. You know, there is a number of green components to this project, not only just at the streetscape and at the plaza, but internally to the building. We have that private amenity courtyard, which has a number of green strategies, again, included as part of our design in that space. You can see there's some trees and some plantings at different layers. I'll talk to you a little bit about the palette strategy in a second. We also have in the northern edge, the northern buffer. All of this is at the ground level. So you can see at this plan, it's all just ground level. We've been able to actually redesign to put a lot more planting along that edge. And you can see that reflected in this graphic. Then, of course, Andy talked about the rooftop terraces. We always had a pool at the upper level with a buffer. So we have been very sensitive about buffering to the neighbors. And as Andy explained, because we are of a structure, concrete structure, we've been able to have enough depth so we can plant, you know, trees or smaller shrubs that will grow and provide that buffer. So we're looking at not only evergreens, but plants that provide seasonal interest. And then with the stepping back, that opened up the opportunity to create this community garden. And along with that, as you saw in the graphic, there is also some green roof. And we can actually plant that not just as a sedum roof, we can actually introduce a variety of plantings, which makes it a much richer environment to, even attract wildlife and provide seasonality. Next. This kind of highlights that point that I was making of sort of how clean and easy it is to move through for a pedestrian, the streetscape. You can also see how we've also been able to incorporate some green, not only at the street edge, but in many occasions at the building edge, providing buffer and, and greenery for the streetscape and that pedestrian scale. Next. So these are just some quick sections. I know we've already went over that, Peter. I think you discussed that, so I won't go into a lot of detail on this, but this kind of shows how we're doing that and providing the adequate soil for the trees to grow. In this particular section, one of the things that we should highlight is that along Wilson, we do have an existing garage condition there that we're preserving, but we've been able to work a very smooth transition to our streetscape. So nobody would even know that that garage is there, but we're able to plant, very healthy trees still at the edge, even with the redesign of that streetscape. Next. North Garfield, you can see here, this is a slightly different condition. We don't have a garage here. We've been able to put some green against the building edge, which is, a really nice addition to the way that the urban environment transition into the neighborhood, adding some more green and reducing the scale of that. Next. And here's the plaza. So as we redesign, we're kind of pretty enthused to sort of being able to still create a place that people in the neighborhood can use. It's a meeting point. We've been able to introduce quite a bit of green. And as you can see, it's bookended on the sides with lush street trees and very generous planting. Our whole goal of this is to have a planting palette that, is based on natives, and I'll talk to you about in a second. But it has seasonality, and with that meaning that it can attract, a wildlife and obviously pollinators, which is something that I know this county and we in our practice actually embrace quite a bit. This plaza has a very generous street edge with green, which provides a buffer. The circulation is very fluid and ample, so we've been able to keep that. And then the plaza does tie to the streetscape with this sort of carpet that unifies the space. This will still allow for some seating for the restaurant, which we really believe that will help animate the streetscape. It is a very, very great activator for spaces. And of course, we'll be able to kind of frame this whole view of that plaza, especially coming from the metro, with the trees on the side and sort of creating that focal point with the backdrop of this building and all this biophilia. Peter also mentioned the canopy cover, the goal of that 40%. So we're happy to report that we were able to meet that, Peter. So we have all of that. Next. This is a quick view of that plaza, and you can see how I was describing sort of that green edge, the trees, that focal point in the center, which creates a little conversation space for, neighbors and residents. There are a variety of seating opportunities with built-in benches and other types of benches. And then beyond and in the background, you can see the cafe or restaurant or whatever tenant comes there, which will become, as I mentioned before, a great activator on this plaza. Then, you can see in this view the things that Andy was mentioning with the biophilia, the planting on the canopy. So it's going to have a very strong green thumb along through it all. Next. I mentioned the buffer in before, so you can see the various elements that we're using from screening with fences to evergreen plantings to new canopy trees that we added. We also added a raised planter, which we were able to add some new trees. And you can see how that transitioned into then the more residential neighborhood to the north. Next, and I believe this may be our last slide, which kind of shows our, embracing this more native palette, both for the trees and shrubs, but especially for all the lower level plantings, which we really want to have that component of, pollinators, but also that seasonality. So the space changes with the season, and there's always something attractive and something with a special interest. I think that's all for us.
The transformers. So this is a little bit on the transformer location, kind of both why it's there. We did talk about it last time. The majority of the site has the existing parking garage underneath it. There's also a water tank, subterranean water tank on North Highland underneath the garage entrance. So basically, when you look, and we need to electrify the building, we need to electrify all the future EVs. So the load of the building is actually quite significant. So basically the only place that we have left is this northwest corner on North Highland. And the idea is we're going to be building a new electrical room right beneath it. We're going to take away a handful of existing parking spaces and create a new electrical room, and then right above it, locate the transformers. If you want to go to the next slide, you kind of visually see what this is going to look like. We do need to raise, you don't really know it, but as you walk along the street and you go past the dentist office that's in that commercial, the commercial use on the first house adjacent on North Highland, there's a little bit of topsoil on the back of the site, and that's basically there's about maybe 6 to 8 inches of topsoil on top of the roof of the garage. So the idea is that we actually need to build up several feet to provide all the power lines to feed the transformers. So the idea is we get these underground as much as possible, turn them up kind of behind that little masonry wall, and then they'll sit on sort of a plinth adjacent to the now enclosed parking garage ramp. And then we can put a decorative fence around this. There's, sort of a kit of parts, if you will, of manufacturers that kind of make this kind of fencing. And this was sort of one that was, this is very close to one of their offerings. The idea is to, basically screen this as much as possible. It is against the parking garage, and it's essentially on top of the roof of the garage below. This is the view kind of standing on North Island looking south towards Wilson.
So there's a good amount of text on this slide, but I think I'll just point out the most important parts. We as the applicant, we went back to SK&I, the architect, and we said, there was very specific feedback in the first SPRC that there should be alternate uses introduced to the garage. And so we really identified 4 different areas that we could allocate a lot more space to than we previously had envisioned. The first is that we expanded the bike route slightly, and that was so we could incorporate a good comment that we got last time about individual bike lockers. We are right there on the bicycle trail, or I should say lane, right on Wilson. So it's not unreasonable to think that there'll be bikers at a higher proportion, relative to a normal project, perhaps. We've also seen a trend towards both e-bikes and e-scooters. And I personally think that trend's going to continue to grow. Now, I think the open secret is if you want to allow those in your building, you need to segregate those in fire rated rooms, frankly, because there's a little bit of risk there while those battery charged vehicles are being charged. So we've introduced that as well. I think we have a quick slide on that. We've also introduced a ton of residential storage on 2 of the 3 levels in this garage. We really want to market this property as being a place where you can maybe downsize, move in, and keep your extra things on site in the garage, accessible to a car, instead of going to a third-party storage facility. We think that's going to be a great amenity. And finally, there are some upgrades related to code for the back of house functions like electrical infrastructure. So the long story short here is that we've actually ratcheted down our parking count to around 320. So as a reminder, we're at 309 units. And we think that as Peter mentioned in his preamble, the code is up to 1, but there's 1 per unit, but there's obviously, I should say, the opportunity to reduce that parking ratio. We don't exactly know how many permits we will sell, but we expect, perhaps in the 0.8 range. But also remember, we have a little bit of retail allocation, and we also have visitor parking. I believe that code is around 10 spaces for the first 200 units. So the long story short is that we're actually not as overparked as this perception may have it. We certainly have strategies for residential guests and adjacent buildings to generate the opportunity to bring people off the street, which I know is important to the neighbors in this community. So we're happy to take questions on that a little bit later. I think Tom's been doing a good job showing you some of the enhanced areas that I described. And we did reinsert these studies about the loading dock. I do know we spent a decent amount of time on this in the first SPRC, but we did just want to remind folks that the location of this loading dock is really driven by the preservation of the garage and its column layout, and also some of these turning studies that we've provided in this graphic to the left of the screen. Finally, a quick reminder that we are going to accommodate that 40-foot truck per code. Make sure that any large moving vans that come can get completely off the street. In fact, I think the overhead door can actually close and really reduce the impact to pedestrians and the neighborhood, which we're happy about from a design perspective. We have a slide here on traffic and related issues. It's probably not the most important content that we have tonight, but we did want to remind folks, one interesting thing that you probably don't see often here in these meetings is that we're actually reducing transportation trips to the project, and that's mostly a mix of going from a high density office to a residential project. So I think that's pretty interesting that we're taking vehicle trips off the road. And of course, we do have a good suite of pedestrian improvements on the sidewalks in terms of upgrading those out of code compliant sidewalks. I've talked a lot about bicycles already. We all know about the bike lane on Wilson. And we are going to create 2 ride sharing, I would call them lay-by areas. And we all know that people are taking ride sharing all the time, and nobody wants to see those vehicles double parked, perhaps blocking either a lane of traffic or the bike lane. Nobody wants to see that. So we're going to program that in here and try to mitigate that issue before it ever becomes an issue. The team here introduced a construction timeline and issues list. And, the bottom line here is it's about a 2-year schedule. It is going to be about 4 months, maybe 6 months shorter than a normal project because we're preserving that garage. But the next slide is probably the one that's we're most excited to share with some of you tonight, which is we haven't selected a project, we haven't selected a general contractor for the site, but we have talked to the contracting community, and we are able to create a truck route plan to keep people out of the neighborhood. And so we are willing here to say that we're going to prevent trucks from cutting through the neighborhood to Lee Highway or wherever they might be going in that direction. And we're willing to reroute them down to Route 50 where most of them want to go, or out to 66 without going through the single family neighborhood.
Trucks can't go in 66.
Okay. Good point. So, I mean, really, we're going to be pushing them down to 395 and 50 West.
And how are they getting down there?
Well, I have this map here, so we're trying to push them. I mean, the bottom line is we're not going to let them pass our site, Bill, up there. We're willing to.
Definitely better than the 7-Eleven where they load in the travel lane.
Yeah.
And unload at night.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear that's been a problem, but we're going to speak specifically with our contractor when that group selected to prevent any of those headaches. And of course, I think this site, as everyone, probably requires that community liaison person to make sure that these different rules are being followed during construction. I think that completes your presentation for tonight. Hopefully we left enough time for spirited discussion here, guys.
Yes. All right, so we'll get rolling with the parking and loading topics.
Are we gonna discuss landscaping?
I guess let's do
Yeah.
it in the order they did it, so let's do landscaping.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay,
they-
we're gonna call an
they did a
audible
little
with the
bit.
rotation then. So we will, so landscaping is where we started, so we'll start with landscaping. Comments?
Yeah. Well, first off, I really salute you for your use of biophilia. I think the screen wall is really exciting. I'm glad to hear the technology's here. And, you know, if you guys pull this off and Wendy, maybe more buildings on Wilson will do it too. And that would be just an outstanding statement for the community. I do have some questions about the plaza. At least on some of the renderings, it looks to me like there's a lot of impervious surface here. And I realize you're trying to do multiple things in conjunction with the staff for the pedestrian use and the seating area and the treescape too. But I don't know, and this is not a bad design in terms of the seating area, but to me, that's just a sort of a waste of concrete. Because I think the notion that people are going to sort of come off the metro and kind of sit there passively is not actually what's going to happen. For one thing, you've got the retail area, the cafe. They're going to provide some seating. Some people will go there, and it seems to me in a lot of cases, people are happy just moving chairs around. And to the extent that you provide chairs that people can just move wherever they want, I think that's a good thing. And that would allow more green space and allow you to cut back on some of the impervious surface. So it seems to me that you could do more things with a plaza design. It's as is, it's handsome, it's not inappropriate for us, but I do think that you could use more green. After all, it's a theme of the building. And speaking of green, you've got this nice sort of rooftop garden along the Garfield side, but Highland Street side has no green touches and comes across as somewhat stark. It seems to me you could add some green touches, even though high up, to at least continue the theme of the building. Continue this notion of a natural statement. So those are my comments. Sure.
Yeah. Trini has it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this design has a good balance of green and actually circulation. I mean, this is pretty much what is required by the county. You know, we're only sort of indenting to be able that where the bench is, it does not protrude into the passageway, which is what was required by the county to make sure that 8-foot clear was fully clear, even from any benches or any even feet or people that were seating. So they're just very small opportunities. I mean, this is really neighborhood base. It's not a huge plaza, is not a huge amount of paving. It's fairly, it's fairly straightforward. It's the sidewalks with this sort of central node surrounded by green. And, this creates sort of a little node where people can pause, say hello, wait to get into the restaurant. So it is really more of a pause. And I do think it will serve the community well. There is, a lot of layers to the planting. I mean, it is a smaller space. It's not a huge plaza. It's really neighborhood serving.
So Jim, I saw you next.
Yeah,
And then we'll go Erica and then Eric.
Trini, I have a couple of things. You might want to sit and observe the plaza that exists outside the Circa restaurant at Clarendon Boulevard and I think it's Danville.
Yeah.
And see how people use that, because I think it's similar in concept to what you're trying to do here. And if you spend a few hours watching, see how that you, because I haven't, so I'm suggesting you do that as part of your due diligence.
Sure.
To see whether this type of idea works, to see how people use that.
Mhm.
Second, for the plaza, against Highland and Wilson, you have those trees, which are good. And then the green under it, which is good. I'm wondering whether those could be bioswales the way there are on 19th Street and L in DC. Whether that's the trees and bioswales are compatible, having them both in the same spot, where water can just flow in and then percolate down. They're really exciting when you see them on 19th Street in the district. They're really nicely done. And I'm wondering whether that is something that could be done here, because you're not having cars parking on the street side, so you don't have to worry about people walking into it. So anyway, I throw that in as ideas. Those are really pretty much my green comments, other than agreeing with what Commissioner Stockwell has said.
All right,
Understood.
please go ahead.
I said understood. Yeah, no, I mean, we've done a ton of bioswales related to, streetscape, and it really has to do, with the stormwater design. So we will work with the civil. There are a number of utilities here, so we'll be very watchful for that. That's, been part of the what's been so difficult. It's almost like a puzzle resolving this plaza. There are so many existing utilities, from Verizon lines to existing, dry utilities and wet utilities. It's a maze, which is why it's been so difficult to get here. As I think Peter knows, because we've been highlighting those as we redesign and relocate things. But point well taken, and we'll work on that if it's possible.
So following up on your comments about the little fountain and seating area as.
There's a metro thing right there.
No, but I mean, I think one of the things that I've seen as it's lived in the space, almost every time I go past it, it's slightly different type of activity. It's almost this little eddy in the current of people flowing through it and around it. And I do think that this plaza, whether it's this design or further modifications to it, has that nice eddy effect that provides sort of a respite / meeting point. And so I do hope that this becomes.
And that's great.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's what it is. And that's why I suggest that Trudy actually sit and
Yeah.
watch it. Because when I've done that in the past in other areas, I've really found, it's really interesting how the space is being used and at different points of the day.
Yeah.
And it is, and is it being used? It's like the number one question. And then once it is, how is it being used? And who is using it?
Yeah.
And all of those only come from observing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Erica, you're next.
All right. I realized I jumped the gun earlier. I just am loving the use of native plants in all of your plantings and things. My only question right now is for the street trees that you guys have planted. Like, this is a like a highly trafficked area. And just like there are studies that show that like street trees like usually are just get very stressed out and don't live as long like in these high stress environments. Do you have any plans for like protecting like the roots around the trees and like to prevent like soil compaction and things like that so that these trees can live long and not be as stressed?
Yeah, we do actually. We, and it is actually even a kind of requirement. We have to show all these soil volumes, and these are areas that are not compacted. And so we're using a number of strategies to make sure that this is uncompacted soil, and it'll provide the right growing environment for these trees.
Awesome. And actually, my only other thing is for the applicants, are you guys planning on making any funding contributions to the tree canopy fund?
Yeah, that's part of the standard site.
Yeah, they will have to. There are certain trees that they just can't replace on site. So yes, they will. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna go Eric next. Eric, please go.
All right. So I have a couple things regarding sidewalks. At least in looking in your walking tour, it says that the sidewalks were reduced by 2 feet below what the Clarendon sector plan calls for. So I'm concerned about that because this is kind of in my mind, this is like the center of Arlington. This is probably where you get the largest crowds of people. We have probably the most community events that happen right where these streets come together right here around the metro. And
Is this more about transportation elements? We're gonna get there next.
okay, I thought that you talked about cars and parking and everything else. Okay, I can
Wait,
hold
sorry,
on.
sorry. We're still on sustainability. Right.
Okay, I again, sorry for jumping the gun.
No worries, no worries. We'll go right. So
Okay.
Yeah, quick question. So is the maintenance of the biophilic elements of the project, like the green wall and the rooftop garden, is that part of the site plan conditions?
Gonna have to be, yeah.
Okay, great.
It's
So
the
like
affected
if
part,
4 years
yeah.
from now, they're like,
Show it to us.
rather have a party deck instead of the gardens. You can't do that because the garden green roof will be part of the site plan conditions. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I've seen some of those tree pits where your trees are below the sidewalk level. Are do you have little fences around them that are potentially trip hazards for people? They also tend to collect trash.
So I don't think any of the street tree areas that are proposed currently are the bio swales.
Okay,
So they should be at the,
so they're at that
Sidewalk
grade, so you don't.
grade. yes.
Oh, you showed a cross section of the sidewalk on the Highland Street side. What is the distance from the curb to the building face? So it looks like it's about 30 feet there in some of your drawings. Feeling it's a lot less than that.
Depends where the section's cut, so if you cut it closer to the Wilson intersection, you have the divot in the building. So if you were to cut it right here, it's gonna be a larger width.
So what, I'm just asking.
Yeah,
what
so-
it is in feet from the building face.
So the curb to the building is approximately 20 feet, plus or minus.
Okay.
And in some places, particularly closer to Wilson Boulevard, that area is widened because of a curb alignment move in towards the center of the street.
Will there be parking on Highland Street?
There is parking on Highland Street north of the garage entry.
Yeah, so the plaza, I live in the Circa building. I have used the plaza, although very infrequently. And I go there after I get an ice cream sometimes and go and sit in it. So like, that's the reason that I've used it. I don't see a lot of people stopping there, so I do kind of hold this concern. Currently what's there with the lots of restaurant tables, to me, seems like a better use of the space than this. And I think this is pretty. Like, I think the plaza that's outside of Circa is pretty, but I don't think it is the most used thing. I don't know if it's kind of counter to what the county has asked for with the plaza, and I don't mean to impede on that really, but I do think the restaurant there and all the seating there, to me, just as a somewhat better use, especially with the Clarendon Park Plaza right there already anyway, which has exactly this stuff there already at a bigger scale. So I don't think it's bad. I just don't think it'll be personally as used as much as we might hope. We're talking about sidewalk width in the next section.
Next section, we're going to go to Mr. Goodman first. I feel like that's a good segue.
Well, you've got this up there.
Sorry, we gotta keep moving on the topic. So Mr. Goodman, you're on for transportation. With much anticipation.
This is up there, but can you answer the question?
Sorry,
You show the sidewalk going.
sorry, he's already going.
All right.
Yeah. Mr. Goodman, the floor is yours.
Okay, again, I just am a little concerned that the sidewalk has been constrained 2 feet. This is, again, what I was trying to say. This is kind of the center of Arlington. This is where you have big community events, you have bicycle races, all different things, and just kind of surprising that we're at least constraining it along Wilson and Highland Street. Down on North Garfield, I could understand it could be a little narrower, but these are really the main routes to the metro, and it just seems that I'm concerned. I'd like to see it back up to 10 feet if that's possible. The other thing is curb cuts. The one curb cut that you have there is kind of narrow. It brings actually traffic from two directions and converges them. If on the opposite side of this sort of parallelogram intersection, they at the metro side, they do have separate curb cuts in the directions of the crosswalks. So I'd like to see this either widened and either depressed more or actually having two separate curb cuts. I think that would be better for people with disabilities instead of kind of sending them in at a 45-degree angle and having them realign themselves with the direction of travel. So that's a concern. And then the one at North Garfield Street, at least the way it's drawn right now, it looks like it's different than the existing one. The existing one actually has wider slopes on either side, so the slope is actually less. It looks like on one side of the one at North Garfield and Wilson Boulevard, you've tightened that up, and that means it's going to be steep on that side. So I'd like to see that open up a little bit more, make that a little bit easier for people to transition from North Garfield Street to the crosswalk. And that's really my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with you on the curb cut piece. Any comments from the developer staff on that?
I just want to make it clear that all those purple pathways are all 8 foot wide.
Yes, and the sector plan requires 8 foot.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, 8 feet is the sector plan and zoning ordinance requirement for this area. And Highland Street, actually, they're clear. I think their total streetscape is slightly wider than what the sector plan calls for, but yes, they are meeting the minimum 8. The narrowness that they're proposing to take in some of these pinch points along here due to the existing pillar is actually taken out of their shy zone rather than out of clear sidewalk width or the planting strip, which again, the clear sidewalk is always a consistent 8 feet.
And I think it should be highlighted that, the walking area is actually bigger. It's just only what's designated as that clear concrete. But there is additional sidewalk that abuts this, making it feel bigger as well.
Well, that's the shy zone, yeah.
Yeah,
You've got
with the
6
shy
foot,
zone.
6 foot planting, 8 foot clear sidewalk. It's only the shy zone that gets narrower than what the sector plan recommends.
Correct.
Right here. The shy zone, though, is the exact depth that the sector plan and the zoning ordinance recommends in front of the retail, just to point that out.
Yeah, but my point was that it will feel bigger than 8 feet because it has all that other paving area adjacent to it.
Yeah, and then I think what's obscured in this drawing, particularly as the transition to the neighborhood on Garfield, is that there is a pretty large, it shows up in the white area there. That's all sort of extra open space to make that transition from the neighborhood. And neighborhood sidewalks are probably what, like 4 feet?
Yeah, they're on the straight side, so we have to transition back to it.
What's going on with the sidewalk? Oh,
I was gonna go to Chad first, and then
So I don't think, it's exactly the point we just talked about. I don't think this slide clearly shows the amount of cement that you're talking about that is there. I know that the Clarendon Courthouse Civic Association really supports wide sidewalks. I understand that you guys have the 8-foot clear sidewalk. I get that. I know that's but what we like to see is closer to 20 feet of cement through here. And I know that this is 20 feet wide is what I think we said earlier. So I get that. I know last time the conversation was, is the building too close to, which I know we talked about and said that it's basically, it has to be like that. But giving as much sidewalk, especially along Wilson, is important to us. And I assume that you guys have maxed it out. I don't, but I just said that's a concern. And I would like, when it goes to planning commission, I'd like to see kind of more information about how much of the Wilson Boulevard side is, the amount of sidewalk plus Shizen along that whole route.
And one thing that I think does get lost on a little bit of this is that in order to provide the protected bike facilities, which have been a critical improvement along Wilson Boulevard, we've actually had to make the curb to curb street wider than is recommended in the Clarendon sector plan. So the applicant's actually delivering a wider street, a comparable sidewalk, all within the same space, particularly hemmed in on the south side where we permitted, because of the historic preservation, that building didn't move back to sort of give a little bit extra to the street area itself. So there's a fair amount of extra right-of-way space that they've been sharing.
on the sidewalk, when you get up to the corner of Highland and Wilson, it looks like the sidewalk goes kind of an extra distance for people to make the right turn on the sidewalk on the Highland side. Yeah, you've got that gray area that kind of links the area, that links the two sidewalks. Is that on private property? Is that intended for outdoor seating? What's happening there?
So it is, it's designed to be more part of the plaza than the sidewalk space. What we've worked with the applicant on is, while cafe seating is not coming forward with this application, we did want to have some thought of where that zone might be. So we kind of anticipate that cafe seating might fill in between the building face and the back of the planting
So the
area.
public would still walk through that area. And I'm not sure that.
If it isn't if it isn't otherwise a cafe permitted under a use permit.
But another question is along Garfield. At the last meeting, you indicated that there would be apartments that were below grade there, and that there would be something between the sidewalk and the building, like a drop off, so that they could have windows. Is that still there, or is that changed?
So, yeah, I mean, maybe didn't mean that there was a question if we could add stoops or accessible stoops to that area.
Stoops down or stoops up?
This is the issue, is that we're tied to the existing, we have we have the existing slab, so that office building, the plaza, all the parking, surface parking, all that structure exists. In some cases, the sidewalk's higher, some cases it's lower. It's very subtle, so it creates sort of really awkward, like sort of tripping conditions and not proper steps. And then if it's down, we'd have to like, you'd basically create like a small bathtub that you'd have to drain. It's almost so close, it's difficult to do it. It's easier if it's like, 2 to 3 feet, you can have steps and it's significant, like a proper stoop. It's very subtle. So we thought that it's better to actually just have a generous planting strip along the entire building and just have ground cover and bushes against the building.
Okay, so this is not like a 4-foot drop off or something?
No. It's not a 4-foot drop off. I mean, it's always within 6 to 8 inches of the existing slab.
Not like
Sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes it's a
A
little
couple of
lower.
blocks up where you walk by the sidewalk and you see people sort of down below
Yeah,
there
no.
watching TV.
There are no units below grade. Everything's at grade, but it's like, it's a very subtle change depending on the slope of the sidewalk.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everybody knows that the protected bike lane is really good. This is a major improvement. We have limited real estate, right away here, and be able to put a protected bike lane in is wonderful. And if it means taking a little bit here and there from other uses, fine. It's good to be able to get that in there. Now, I have questions actually for Mr. Gibson on Garfield Street. Right now, Garfield is really wide by the building, like super wide. It's like, why? It makes no sense. And then it narrows down when you get to the first house, and then it narrows down further after the second house when you're going in. Do we need that much asphalt there? Can we widen sidewalks or put something else? Or is that already being done by this? Have we already widened the sidewalk into that traffic way or parking lane?
I think that they are doing it. I can guarantee that the slides they have in their deck don't do a great job of demonstrating that. I'm hoping that when we come to PCTC, we'll have much more of a connection from Wilson into the neighborhood edge to show that being not the weird jogs you're used to seeing.
Okay, great, because I really want us to have a good graphic on that, because I'm gonna be raising it again. Because that part of Garfield always bothered me.
Yeah.
It just makes no sense to be so wide. It's just not good for the neighborhood. It's not good for any number of reasons. It's a total waste of space. So, let's try to fix it while we have the opportunity, and we can get good things out of that. We can get wider sidewalks, so we get tree pits. We can get more out of that, essentially even whole extra lane.
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
that
it is a much more uniform transition into the neighborhood than the existing conditions.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Eric, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so just to add to talk about the bike lane, I'm also a very big proponent for protected bike lanes. I bike around there often. And I'm a fan of having the parking lane to kind of add as a buffer between the moving traffic. And I was just wondering, is it feasible or possible, so where the dashed line is to separate the parking lane from the bike lane, would y'all be able to add planters there as well as an additional buffer? And as a physical barrier? I've seen it done in other places where it also kind of adds to green space, where you can get it. And that just, also helps to add separation between bikers and people that are getting in and out of their cars.
We can look into that a little bit more. This is a 3 to 3.5 foot wide buffer, which is kind of just a door swing buffer. But I'm gonna make sure that I answer your question accurately and see what the minimum requirements for those planters might be.
Okay, thank you.
If I can just add, I also bike in this area a lot, and even where there is a protected bike lane, cars don't understand and they will drive through the protected area and park in the bike lane. So yeah, having some physical barrier beyond just these little sticks that can be driven over apparently.
Lights posts, yeah.
The entry elements and exit elements are something that we're working on. Yes.
Yeah, something to add is we did add the concrete islands or medians on each side, so that'll
good.
Park there as well. All right, does anybody have any final comments on this topic?
Are the two, like rideshare parking right there at the lobby or?
Is that the point over there?
I think we're anticipating that there could be these first two parking spaces.
So, okay, yeah.
Is it still transportation?
Yep.
Could I?
Well, you're a member of the public.
Okay.
Public comment.
Okay.
Sorry.
No.
I don't make the rules.
No, okay.
Are those Uber and Lyft really the Pudo?
Yeah, that'd be part of that group, yeah.
And that's on Wilson, not on Garfield?
We would not, I would say that on Garfield and Highland, where there is on-street parking, I will not promise you how they'll be used. We'll use those to maximize the utilization. So if we need short-term Pudo parking on either of those because of observations in the future, we can easily address that. And so I don't want to overcommit or make promises that we're not going to address.
Bill didn't raise it, I'm surprised. He always wants to know where the pizza guy's gonna drop it off.
Well, that's a holdover from Kerry Johnson.
Yeah.
So we have this performance parking pilot going on right now where we put the monitors in the ground. So are we asking applicants when they're doing these parking spaces, like, hey, put the monitor in and cover that cost for us?
We have integrated standard conditions now to address that.
But on
Yes.
parking, since you've got a lot of extra parking in there, or will have, parking is pretty tight in Clarendon. So it's basically two questions. I think the Baptist church across the street uses parking there, that they rent parking on Sundays. Is that going to continue?
Yes.
Okay. The other thing is that some of the buildings that have been built further down on Wilson are parked at maybe half a space per unit. So a lot of those cars wind up on the streets, getting with the George Mason student parking, including into the neighborhoods. In fact, one of the buildings was a brand new building. Somebody went in there. The building was now half rented, and they wanted to see if they could get a parking space. Parking spaces were all taken. Can you kind of hold yourself out to some of those people where they could then pay to park in your garage, maybe a little extra revenue?
So Bill, I think when we work with the applicant on the conditions, sometimes we try to preclude that. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that they don't have to go through extra zoning hurdles to allow that.
It would be nice if we could allow that.
Yeah.
Which makes some of the other buildings a little bit more rentable down the block too. And you've got to consider that if you've got two people in an apartment, one may be able to take Metro to work, the other one may have to drive. Or you've got elderly people, they need a car to go to the doctors, or you've got a family with children, and you're not going to take the bicycle and the child down to Whole Foods for your grocery shopping.
Some of us will, apparently.
I take my 3 kids on my bike.
Particularly on a rainy day.
I have a cover.
Yeah, we're aligned on your two comments.
Yeah, and thank you for changing that, because we, as planning commission, really like the idea of shared parking. That where somebody is not using their spaces, using it for some other building is better than having to build. So that really should be county policy.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree as well. Okay, so at this stage in the evening, we'll move on to comment. Is anyone in the chat?
Oh, I have a question on construction.
Oh, yeah, we'll throw one more in there. We got time. Yeah.
When since you don't have to dig out, which is great, I mean, all around thank you for using that embedded energy. That's really, really good. We did a second project recently that's had that, and we're really happy at the last project that did that. When you're building, this is a lot of people walking along the street. Is that sidewalk going to be maintained, or is it going to have to be protected out onto the street? How are we going to be dealing with, especially along Wilson Boulevard? People have to cross the street all the time. How is that going to work?
So what I would say is DES is going to strongly, I don't know if I would say prohibit, but push to ensure that sidewalk is provided on the north side of Wilson Boulevard. Whether that is by removing the parking and shifting all of that out a little bit to make space for construction, that might be one of the solutions. There may be some other solutions as they have to remove the existing trees.
And if you're going to have shed over the sidewalk, the lighting has to be good in there. Because again, you're going to be full year, there's going to be dark times where if it's not properly lit, it's going to be really creepy and people aren't going to want to walk along it. But keeping a pedestrian path along there is going to be very, very important. Other than like a couple days of interruption to live with, but if it's going to be weeks and months on end, that's not going to be acceptable.
Yeah, I think we can work with the county on that. The only time during construction where that makes us a little nervous is when we're demoing that side of the building. We really don't want
I get that.
people
I
anywhere
don't want to
close
fall
to
into
that.
anybody.
Yeah,
And the shed is good enough
yeah,
when
it's
the
not
big
good.
slab comes down.
Yeah,
But other than that, we really need to keep that available to people.
So now,
Now,
barring any
I'm
further
done.
comments, we will go to public comment.
We have one online, Bernie Byrne, and one.
Okay.
And Miss Singer.
Miss-
Signed up first. Yeah.
All right, yeah, so Miss Singh, you beat Dr. Byrne tonight, so you're up first.
Thank you for explaining. Thank you for the time. I wanted to point out, not to make anyone uncomfortable, but I'm the only person of color here. And that has really decreased in my neighborhood in Clarendon and Lyon Park. I've been living at Viewpoint for 10 years, and it's only gotten less and less people of color. The only reason that there are people of color in my building is because half of it is affordable housing, the other half is rent stabilized. So I don't feel great about having an apartment building that only white people benefit from. All the pictures and renderings were white that lived in the building, and the only time there were black people were when they were in the public park. It sends a message that like Clarendon is a place for brown people, black people to visit, but only for white people. I don't feel great about that. My building, I talked to my leasing manager today, gets 10 calls a day that she has to put people on a wait list and say, sorry, like we don't have affordable housing at the moment. And this is like a really important area because it's metro accessible and people who can't afford cars need to live in this area. So I don't think it's fair. I don't feel great about having to put up with construction for 2 years to only have predominantly white people who will only further marginalize that community. The majority of people who live in this area are white. Like a lot of them tend to get drunk on weekends and litter. Like that's what is left over on Highland in the mornings on Saturdays and Sundays. So I don't feel great about that. I'd really like to see some affordable housing and some commitment to the community to make sure that it is like continuing to be diverse over years. And I'd really like to see a commitment to like the times of construction. Like the people who live in that affordable housing, like they live there forever, like they don't leave. And so I don't think it's fair to talk about the neighborhood side as Garfield, where there are single homes, and the other side is like, oh, well, because of the step back on the Garfield side, we're fine with you going up 2 feet. Like that doesn't really feel fair or equitable just because we're not homeowners and can't afford to live there, but we all live there for many, many years. I think heights are there for a reason. That penthouse area is not small. I look into it. And I have confirmed with our leasing office this morning that they are able to pay for affordable housing because they can charge higher for units that have a view.
Missing, thank you very much.
Yeah, so just wanted to add that.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Bernie Byrne.
Dr. Byrne, the floor is yours. Dr. Byrne, can you hear us? Dr. Byrne.
We can't hear you, unfortunately. I see your microphone is, but we can't hear you, sir. Yeah, he's online, and I'm sorry, we can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Okay, sorry, I'm sorry to switch.
That's all right.
Although this project will have green walls and some plantings on its grounds, on its ground level, it mostly lacks biophilia. The building needs a green roof and/or rooftop solar panels and green internal open spaces. All sides of the building should have green walls, not just those along the Wilson Boulevard frontage. Native flowering vines should hang down from the roof ledges and balconies. They should climb on trellises from the ground or from ledges. Tree trenches containing native flowering plants that feed pollinators. Low fencing or elevation should prevent these from dogs and tramplings. There should be little mowed grass. I see some of this on the pictures, but not very much of it. The plaza at the corner of Wilson Boulevard and Highland Street should have many more plantings and much less pavement. Again, there are plantings, but just not enough. It should resemble a park, not a plaza. The conceptual land use plan lists 11 species of trees. However, 4 of these are cultivars. Autumn Blaze Freeman Maple, Green Gable Tupelo, Happy Days Sweet Gum, and American Century Linden. Cultivars often don't feed native pollinators. Some have toxic foliage. Replace all with their native parents or with another species. The landscape plan does not list any shrubs, ground covers, or perennials. This is the most important problem. The public and the county board cannot review the suitability of any of these plants unless the applicant places them in the plan in a timely manner. I mean, you just can't do it. The applicant must submit landscape sheets that show all shrubs, ground covers, and perennials before the planning commission considers this project. The plant should include common milkweed, which feeds many monarch butterfly caterpillars. Pollinator plants should fill all landscaped areas. All plants must be native. None must be cultivars unless they are more resistant to the disease than their parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Byrne.
I think that's our last public speaker.
Okay, well, I believe that's all we have for this evening, so I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out. My commissioner colleagues, tonight is our 3rd meeting this week, so and thank you to staff as well. You all have been hanging in there with us. So thank you all again very much for coming out. I said last time, you could have been anywhere tonight. You chose to invest your time in the community, so thank you very much for coming. And we'll be back in May for hearings. If you have any questions, feel free to email staff or myself. We'll be happy to answer.